Welcome back to the Female Athlete Inner Circle. It's the online vault for female athletes, coaches, and parents. With the vault, the goal is to educate everyone out there, everything these female athletes face on the playing field, but off the playing field. And today, huge topic, we're going to be talking about nutrition. We're going to be talking about fuel in the body. So Jackie is my guest today. Jackie, welcome to the call.
Thank you so much. Really excited to be here.
I'm excited to talk to you because you work predominantly with athletes. So this is your expertise, your wheelhouse. So for everyone listening that's not familiar with you, let's talk about your background and your bio.
Yeah, absolutely. So like you said, my name's Jackie Slomin. I'm a sports dietitian and I primarily work with student athletes. So anyone that's looking to perform better, enhance their recovery, just overall be healthier, have more energy, and really take their competition to the next level. That's really what I work with people on. A little bit about my background. So I have a master's degree in sports nutrition and exercise, and I've been working with student athletes for about 5 or 6 years now. So we'll cover anything from nutrient timing, going over recovery, performance, how to improve your strength, everything and anything in between to make sure that you're fueled properly and performing your best.
Nice. So when female athletes come to see you, and what's the number one thing they're coming to see you for?
So female athletes in particular, it's usually, something's wrong is usually more often than not. So they're either not eating correctly, they're sluggish, they're slow, there's some kind of injury going on. And then you have the other end of the spectrum where people are really they're trying to tighten up their routine, they're trying to perform as best as possible, and they're really just looking to gain whatever competitive edge they can in that regard.
Nice. Do you work with more individuals or more teams?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So I do work with teams and sometimes I'll do workshops and trainings depending on what time it is in their season. But for the most part, I focus on the individual athlete. So we'll work together to create something that's totally customized and individualized based on that person.
Nice. And so when you're working with the individual, what do you typically focus on with their nutrition?
Yeah, so it comes down to a few things, and it definitely depends on the situation. But really what the goal is to create an entire plan to really encompass all aspects of it. So we do focus on their performance, their recovery, but there's really 3 key things that we focus on with athletes to make sure they're successful. And those 3 things are making sure that they're consistent in their routine. So we need to come up with something that's realistic. So a big thing that I see that athletes really focus on that kind of sets them up for failure instead of success is going with really strict meal plans or not just really having an idea of how to strategize and incorporate these things. So we like to do consistency. Individuality is the next thing. So as I was saying, every single athlete is different. So obviously, as an example, if you're a 120-pound swimmer or you're a 110-pound figure skater, you're not going to be following the same plan as your 160-pound female lacrosse player. So we really individualized it based on the athlete, their sport, their position, and then just the nuances that come with, being your own person, having your own food preferences, things like that. And then the third thing that we really focus on is planning, because as we said before, it's not so much, okay, here's my list of foods that I'm going to eat and my list of foods that I'm not going to eat. It's that black and white mentality doesn't work. What we have to do is plan ahead. So that way, regardless of what the situation is, whether you're traveling, you're home, someone cooks, someone doesn't. That way you're prepared no matter what the situation is, and you can make the best decisions to fuel your body.
When you're seeing these individuals, because I'm assuming most of them are probably middle school or high school. I know you've worked with some elite level and pro. Do you have the parents in on these sessions? Because when you're talking about planning, I'm guessing that the parents play a big role in this.
Yeah, absolutely. So, fortunately and unfortunately, without the parents, my work with athletes can't exist, because the truth of the matter is, to put it simply, that your parents are the ones that are in charge of the environment. So they're the ones bringing the food in. They're more often than not the ones that are cooking, although I have met some great kids that love to cook. That's fantastic when it happens. But they're really controlling the environment. So when we talk about manipulating your environment for success, they really are at the forefront. I do it on a case-by-case basis, but typically what we'll do is I will work with the athlete one-on-one for part of our time together, just to really get them to motivate and internalize and set their own goals. And then what we do afterwards is we bring the parent in and we plan how we're actually going to attack those goals. So setting themselves up and understanding what they need to do to get that accomplished.
Nice. I love it. I love that you kind of individualize for every person you see. It's not like a cookie cutter program. So I think for all like kind of the female athletes, the coaches out there, you know, you hear these words, you know, pre-workout, post-workout, nutrient timing. So I would love for you to go into those and kind of describe a little bit. Obviously, like whether you're a basketball player, soccer player, it would be a little different, but kind of just a broad spectrum of those terms.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because I could definitely talk for hours and hours on any one of those topics. It really does get kind of complex, but just in general, I guess there's really three things that are going to come down to that. So nutrient timing is kind of the difference and the effect that your body has on taking in certain things. So whether that's carbohydrates, proteins, fats, water, electrolytes, that's really the difference between what you want to take in pre-workout versus post-workout. Nutrient periodization is really just setting yourself up. So as an example, if your athlete is in their season currently, which most aren't, but just as a hypothetical, if they're doing their 2 to 3 hour trainings, they're working out intensely, they're going to have completely different and heightened needs than when they're in their off season. And, you know, maybe they're still training, they're still trying to keep up, but it's just not as intense. So really customizing your nutrition to fit your season. So that way athletes aren't, you know, gaining large amounts of weight in the off season, or on the other end of the spectrum, they're not under fueling when they are working out and competing. And then the other part of that's just really the day-to-day nutrition. So a big thing that most athletes focus on, and it is important, is nutrient timing in the aspect of your pre-workout and your post-workout nutrition. So knowing what to put in your body before you work out makes a big difference in how you're going to perform. You know, as an example, and, you know, again, everyone's different. So these really are just general recommendations that I wouldn't necessarily say, go ahead and try all these things right away, but it's what does work for a good amount of people. Is you really want to be fueling your body with carbohydrates, and specifically glucose and glycogen stores are what your body is going to be really dependent on when you're doing that intense exercise that most athletes are doing. So having some kind of meal 2 to 3 hours before, that's usually high in carbohydrates to really sustain our fuel, and then also moderate and low amounts of fat. And I know that's a little confusing because when you think athlete, you think, all right, like, we got to be muscular, we got to be packing on all this protein and this and that during every phase of training. But the truth is that your body doesn't rely on protein as a source of energy. You're really focusing on that glycogen. So that's really what you want to focus on in the beginning before a training. And the other really important part of that is exactly when you're eating and how long that is before your training plays a huge effect. So if an athlete's eating 2 to 3 hours beforehand, they could have a pretty balanced meal following those guidelines that I just mentioned. But the closer you get to your training, and again, this sounds counterintuitive, I know, the less fiber, the less whole grains, the less kind of heavy food that takes a long time to digest that you are going to want in your stomach. Basically, we want that energy metabolized rapidly. So those are kind of the things to look for.
So we'll go into post-workout in a second. So for people that are listening, and again, this is more broad topic. We're not talking about a particular sport right now. What would you, like, give me some examples of what would be probably, you know, the best to eat for these carbohydrates? And again, this isn't for everyone. It's a broad thing, but would you have a recommendation what these athletes should be eating?
Yeah. So as an example, if someone's having something that's only 30 or 60 minutes before their workout, again, we're going to focus on those simple carbohydrates. So that could be something like a low fiber granola bar. It could be something like low fiber toast with a little bit of nut butter on it. Just, we want something in our stomach, but we just don't want to go overboard because that tends to lead to those things like sluggishness and cramping and pulling water into your stomach, which, as you know, as an athlete, if you're moving and doing all these crazy techniques and competing, you don't want to be having that very full feeling.
Nice. And then just as you were just talking, this came into my head. Female athletes in my, like, kind of experience, like, fear the word carbohydrates. Like, and they don't want to eat carbs. Like, talk about maybe a little bit more in depth why they need to eat some form of carbohydrates to help them fuel their body and perform for their practice, their competition.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So it comes down to, I guess, two things that I think most people can relate to. So as you're working out intensively, have you ever, well, let me ask you this question. You're a former athlete yourself, right?
Yep.
As a kid, did you ever have to wake up for early morning practice and, you know, the last thing on your mind was, crud, I don't want to eat anything because I'm going to feel sick, right?
Absolutely. 4:30 practice in the morning in college.
So how'd you feel about 30 minutes into that practice not having anything to eat?
You know what? It's funny. I think I always shoved a banana as fast as I could in my mouth, but no, we had kids that were ready to drop, you know, woozy, dizzy. And I've been there, but I think I don't know. I think I shoved, like I said, I had a banana, I shoved it in my mouth, but then you feel sick after you like shove it in your mouth at 4:00 in the morning. But yeah, so to answer your question, no, you feel like you're about to drop.
Yeah, so the reason that happens is because your body doesn't have the fuel source that it needs to perform its best. And that particular fuel source, in most cases, again, is your carbohydrates. So your carbohydrates get stored as glycogen in your body. And what happens as you sleep, you know, it takes anywhere between 12 to 24 hours, but your body gets depleted overnight. So when you're not fueling consistently with that type of fuel source, as you go to work out, you're pretty much a gas tank running on empty. And what that means is you're not going to be able to perform as well. You're going to be sluggish, tired. Your mood's going to be affected. Pretty much everything that you don't want to be happening while you're training and competing is going to be happening when you don't have that proper fuel source.
Nice. So we kind of covered pre-workout pretty well. Let's talk about post-workout. What should these athletes be looking for?
Yeah, so post-workout, and again, let's just assume that your athlete's been working out for a substantial amount of time. They've maybe incorporated some lifting, some training, and now they need to really recover. So carbohydrates are definitely still important in this area because, again, as we said, when we're exercising, when we're doing that intense activity, we are using our glucose and our glycogen stores. So really refueling with that is going to be super important. And then the other thing that we actually do want to focus on that time as well is really rebuilding our muscles. So after your training, after your routines, your muscles, I guess the simplest way to put it is, let's just pretend they're damaged, they're weakened in our body. And in order to repair them and recover them and make them stronger, now that we've gone through this effort and this training, your body needs protein in order to stimulate that muscle synthesis.
Nice. So I just totally lost my train of thought. That is great. So when you work with these individuals, are you like telling them what they should eat, or you're kind of giving them a guide to be like, okay, after you have your game, we want to make sure we're eating 2 to 3 hours. Here's a list of foods that would help you fuel your body, or do you kind of write specific meal plans for these athletes?
Yeah, so again, it definitely depends on the athlete. So some people do like that really concrete, like, here's a list of recommendations, and then we kind of go more into detail about, okay, like, here's what works, here's some options, but what we really need to do, again, is focus on that individual. So what I do is work with them to pick those options and pick those things that they're going to enjoy, that they're going to like. And it's not necessarily focusing on, all right, it has to be, Julie, you got to eat this banana, you got to eat this piece of chicken after you work out. It's really having them understand and be able to make their own choices, so that way they can fuel themselves for success in any situation.
Yeah, no, I like that because, most of these people that we're working with, they're not going to be athletes for the rest of their lives. So if you're kind of teaching them how to make, better choices, it's going to help them when their career's over to kind of sustain that again throughout their life. Because I know when I graduated college, granted we were working out 4 hours a day, right? So it really didn't matter what you're putting in your body per se. You're eating tons of calories, but then you stop playing and you try to keep up with what you were eating. It doesn't work.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that I like that you're trying to teach these individuals like how to feed their body, not kind of like, oh, this is how every basketball player should eat. So that's great. So I said, like, before basketball practice, I would shove a banana in my mouth, and I can eat bananas. I don't feel sick, but I know for some athletes, they eat a banana, they feel awful, they're going to get sick. So do you kind of do like a trial period with your athletes, like before, like there would actually be a game, like to work on like what foods work for them and what doesn't?
Yeah, absolutely. So the one thing that I do, and I think honestly this could probably be related to a lot of different areas in sports, is we need to set up a plan and, like you said, trial it out. The worst thing that I think someone could really do is to start making these changes and start making these recommendations like the weekend of a tournament, because everyone's different. And even if something works for 90% of the athletic population, you could fall into that 10% where, all right, you had a bad reaction to a food, a supplement you took, a sports drink, and instead of having that performance enhancement you were hoping for, instead of playing and feeling your best, you could be cramping, you could be nauseous, you could, end up in the bathroom during halftime instead of on the field, all the things that we don't want to happen. So what we really do is try to trial out these things on an off period. So that way we can come back and say, hey, this worked. I felt great. I didn't do it. Like, let's replan and refocus our attacks. So that way, when we do have those big competitions and those things that really you're riding on, you're prepared 100% and you're not leaving anything to chance.
Nice. I love that you do that, because the one thing I always try to get across to everyone that I work with is that we're all individuals. What works for me is not going to work for you. So I know you work with all these female athletes, and I know obviously you're talking about, focusing on performance, but what also do you work on with them to just focus on being healthy?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So just in the health aspect in general, I mean, it is an all-encompassing area, but a big thing that I will also work on with people is just understanding the importance of fueling your body, not only for your performance, but just your day-to-day energy. So as an example, a deficiency in just one nutrient could lead to things like depression, mood swings, irritability, anything like that. So having a balanced diet and just really understanding what moderation is going to be very important. And also just working on things like positive body image and feeling confident with what you're doing and how you're feeling goes a big way in helping, again, not only fuel and not only have that energy, but just as you go into adulthood, you want to feel confident, you want to feel like you're taking care of yourself. And we really want to avoid those body image issues that can come with focusing on the wrong things in nutrition.
Nice. That's very, very important, working with female athletes. So right now, this interview is going to air in the summer. And we always hear every summer, when athletes are outside, they're playing in the heat, ridiculous amounts of heat. They're not getting hydrated. They're getting heat stroke, and then the extreme. Some of these athletes do die. What would be your advice right now to kind of just the coaches, the athletes that are preparing for the hot summers, just to make sure that their bodies are, ready to take on what they're about to do?
Yeah. So again, setting out your environment up is going to be a big thing. So if you're a coach, if you're a parent, I know a lot of sports teams and a lot of, female athlete teams, they'll usually have parents kind of set up some kind of snack cycle, or someone's going to be bringing those things for their kids. Because again, we can tell our kids all we want to bring water bottles, bring this, bring that, but the more your environment set up success, the better. So really prioritizing, having those fluids, those beverages available. And again, setting up a hydration plan is something that's individualized, but a good rule of thumb is your athlete should be drinking a water bottle or two an hour or two before practice. They should, in theory, be hydrating every 15 minutes with a few gulps of water. And while I know that's not always realistic and practical in practices, getting as close to that goal as possible is really going to help them stay hydrated and performing their best. It's amazing how quick dehydration can set in. And the interesting thing about that is once you feel thirsty, it's already too late. When you're feeling that thirst, that means that your body is already dehydrated. So replenishing it is a priority, but you're already going to start to experience those symptoms of fatigue and, cloudiness and just not performing as well as you can.
Nice. I love that you said a snack cycle. I've actually never really thought of that, as most of these athletes, especially if they're in college, like going into college preseason, they're going double days. So they better be eating and they better be hydrating. This is like kind of a loaded question, so I might put you on the spot. I do apologize. So obviously we want athletes to be drinking water, but when they're doing double days and it's 100 degrees out, are you like a supporter that they should be drinking some sort of like electrolyte drink? Or do you think water can just cover their hydration needs?
Yeah, so in the specific example that you gave, they absolutely should be having electrolyte recovery. So Replenishing your electrolytes depends on a few things, and the big thing that it depends on is how long you're exercising for. So if you're just doing, a quick 30-minute run or like a really quick training, you most likely do not need to be replenishing with an electrolyte drink. But for athletes that are exercising greater than an hour, you're going to want those electrolytes. That's your potassium and your sodium. And the other thing, again, that we mentioned that's really important when you're exercising for prolonged amounts of time is replenishing that glycogen for energy. So what most sports drinks do have, in addition to those electrolytes, is that glucose that's in there to really supply your body with the fuel it needs to keep going at the intensity that you're going.
Nice. I think that was a loaded question, so I appreciate you answering it. But I think, like everyone listening, the biggest takeaway is you need to hydrate. Water, obviously, if you're going for long periods of time and it's 100 degrees out, then yes, get the electrolytes. Make sure you're snack cycling, you're fueling your body. So as we wrap up this call, Jackie, is there anything else you want to touch on that we've talked about today, or add anything in?
Yeah. So, again, I think the consistency, the planning, and just really having a good understanding of the importance that nutrition has, not only for your performance and your fueling, but just your everyday health, is really important to touch base with. Nutrition could be the difference between having an average season or even, getting injured on the field because you're not performing your best versus having an amazing season, going to a championship. It really does have such a big impact that I don't think people realize the extent of it is more than just healthy eating. So being able to plan and being able to get that in place is going to make a huge difference, not only in the short term as an athlete, but in your long-term health.
Nice. And you couldn't have said that better, because I've been on a kick lately about the ACL and female athletes. And one of the things that coaches keep, talking about is, yes, we need to do sports performance training, but the athletes need to focus on their nutrition, what they're fueling their body with, because it matters. So for everyone listening on the call, if they want to find more information about you, or they'd like to work with you, where can they find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So for the people that are watching this interview, I do have a slightly special offer that I'd like to extend. So if you are interested in working together and you're an individual, I am offering a free 45-minute session where we can just go over some of these strategies and see if they're a good fit. So they can pop over to my website. It's www.jackieslomin.com, or email me, and that's info@jackieslomin.com, and just mention that in the subject line, and we can go from there. And if you're a coach and you're looking for some of these workshops or trainings for your own athletes, you can reach me the same way, and we can chat and see if we'd be a good fit together.
Awesome. What I'll do is, when we put this interview in the vault of the Inner Circle, below the interview, we'll put your information. So when they reach out to you, reference the Inner Circle, coaching session. So that's awesome. Jackie, I appreciated chatting with you. You and I will obviously continue this conversation, because I think, being an athlete, we need to work obviously on the strength part, the mental part, but nutrition recovery is huge. So again, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me on. Happy to be here.